I clearly had one of the most ridiculous abilities imaginable. If someone killed me, I would become 100 times stronger. But out of all possible fates, I ended up transmigrating into the ancestor of the strongest sect in existence. The problem was that I had absolutely no cultivation at all. Yet whenever I revealed my identity, every enemy would flee in terror before even making a move. Deep down, I knew this fake strength couldn't be trusted forever. So in order to trigger my ability as quickly as possible and truly become stronger, I sealed myself inside the Forbidden Land for 3,000 years. Then one day, I heard the calls of my descendants and calmly stepped out of the Forbidden Land. Even though no one could sense the slightest bit of cultivation from me, Li Jianshui was convinced that I had successfully broken through during my seclusion and reached an unimaginable realm. Looking at me, he said excitedly, "Now those people from the Blood River Sword sect are doomed." A while later, I looked at Leng Mingyuan and said coldly, "Right now, cut off one arm from every one of them and have them sever half of their cultivation." Upon hearing my order, Leng Mingyuan didn't hesitate at all. A flash of sword light swept through the air, and in an instant, all of his subordinates had their arms severed and were heavily injured. Then he cautiously looked at me and asked, "Senior, may we leave now?" I sneered and replied, "You killed so many disciples of First Mountain and still think you can leave alive? The reason I had their arms cut off first was so they wouldn't die too painfully. Now kill them all." Hearing that, Leng Mingyuan frowned. He clearly wanted to say something, but he didn't dare. In the end, he could only grit his teeth and obey my command. After personally killing all of his own men, the uneasiness in his heart grew even stronger. I could practically see the fear in his eyes as he thought, "This Jutian true man has absolutely no bottom line. Is he going to force me to kill myself and apologize next? My daughter has only just appeared in this world. If I die here, is he really going to wipe out the entire Blood River Sword sect as well?" Finally, he bowed his head and said, "Junior knows his sins are unforgivable. I am willing to die here. I only hope Senior will spare my Blood River Sword sect." I looked at him indifferently and said, "Not only will I hunt down every descendant of your sect, but I will slaughter every single person in your entire sect until none remain." The moment those words left my mouth, Leng Mingyuan completely snapped. His eyes turned red as he roared, "Old bastard, you've gone too far!" In the next instant, he dashed in front of me with a sword step and thrust his blade straight through my chest. As I felt my life force rapidly fading away, I was overjoyed. After 3,000 years, this damned cultivation bottleneck was finally about to break. Leng Mingyuan stared at the sword in his hand in disbelief. He had actually killed the legendary Jutian true man. But what confused him even more was that I was laughing as I died. On the other side, Li Jianshui, the current sect master of First Mountain, turned deathly pale. One of the Blood River Sword sect members mocked him and said, "Li Jianshui, you're really something. Go kneel in front of that broken Forbidden Land and kowtow a few more times. Let's see if another ancestor of First Mountain comes out." The moment those words fell, I walked out of the Forbidden Land again without a single injury on my body. Seeing another version of me appear, the smile on Leng Mingyuan's face instantly froze. He stared at me with wide eyes and blurted out, "How are you alive?" I ignored everyone's reaction completely and instead focused on examining the condition of my new body. Now my cultivation had reached the Life Authority realm. Although it was more than 100 times stronger than before, compared to Leng Mingyuan, who had already reached the 4th realm, I was still no different from an ant. Looks like I'll have to provoke this guy a little more. I slowly looked at him and declared, "I am Jufeng True Man. I never expected my senior brother would die at the hands of a nobody like you. You truly deserve death." Leng Mingyuan stared at this completely new version of me, unable to hide his shock and uncertainty. The previous Jutian true man had possessed no detectable cultivation whatsoever, while this one clearly seemed to be in the Life Authority realm. He couldn't understand what was happening at all. Then he looked toward Li Jianshu and couldn't help but ask, "Li Jianshui, are all of your sect's ancestors made of clay figures or something?" Leng Mingyuan looked at me with complete disdain and sneered, "So fragile? It seems First Mountain has truly declined. Even the ancestors you summon are all this useless." But just as he was preparing to wipe out everyone and leave no survivors behind, my figure appeared in front of him once again. This time, my cultivation had already reached the Dao Palace realm. I pointed at him and shouted, "You dare kill the 2 junior brothers of me? Jutian Jade True Man? You deserve death. Great wilderness heaven-seeking finger." The moment he heard that, Leng Mingyuan hurriedly activated a secret treasure from his sect to defend himself. However, after waiting several seconds, he realized that no attack had arrived at all. His expression gradually relaxed as he thought this was just another useless ancestor bluffing. Then I coldly said, "My great wilderness heaven-seeking finger is a spiritual attack. You've already been struck and still don't realize it." Hearing that, Leng Mingyuan panicked and immediately began examining his body. At that exact moment, I gathered all my spiritual power into a single point and thrust a finger forward. Instantly, a beam of force pierced straight through his shoulder blade. Injured and enraged, Leng Mingyuan completely lost his temper. He unleashed several sword attacks in succession and directly killed me on the spot. Then he quickly circulated his cultivation technique to heal his injuries. At the same time, he activated a communication jade talisman and sent a message back to the Blood River Sword Sect. Inside First Mountain is a mysterious forbidden area. There appear to be countless ancestors hidden within it. Although their strength is weak and their methods are strange, they give the feeling of being impossible to kill completely. To prevent even stronger ancestors from appearing, I suggest the sect send additional experts immediately. After sending the message, Leng Mingyuan charged toward Li Jianshui. This mission had already dragged on through too many twists and turns, and he had completely lost patience. All he wanted now was to finish the task and return home as quickly as possible. Yet before he could relax for even a moment, I appeared behind him again. "I am Juju True Man." Before I could even finish speaking, I swung my staff and smashed it directly into his body, sending him flying more than 10 meters through the air. Furious, Leng Mingyuan roared, "Old bastard, you have no martial virtue. You actually launched a sneak attack." But now my cultivation had already reached the 4th realm. I was too lazy to waste time talking anymore. I abandoned all tricks and illusions and immediately began fighting him with everything I had. After roughly 3 minutes of intense combat, I burst into loud laughter as I breathed my last breath once again. The heavily wounded Leng Mingyuan felt chills run down his spine when he heard my laughter. Something was terribly wrong. Every time one ancestor died, an even stronger one appeared. If another came out now, what realm would it be? Ignoring the injuries covering his body, he decided he had to leave this cursed place immediately. But just as he turned to escape, my figure appeared once more. I looked at him coldly and said, "You killed people from First Mountain and still think you can leave?" Terror instantly filled his face. "Don't come any closer," he shouted. I simply raised one hand and pressed downward. A giant spiritual hand condensed from pure energy descended from the sky. With a deafening boom, Leng Mingyuan exploded into a cloud of blood mist. After dealing with the enemy, I carefully examined my current strength. This new body had already reached the dragon painting realm, but in the grand scheme of cultivation, I was still nothing more than a slightly stronger ant. Beyond the dragon painting realm were the immortal platform realm, quasi-emperor realm, great emperor realm, mortal immortal realm, and many more terrifying levels. I still needed to find a way to become stronger. Thinking back on my previous deaths, I realized the system's rewards were becoming less impressive each time. It seemed I would need to come up with more creative and meaningful ways to die in the future. At that moment, Li Jianshui finally recovered from his shock and began reporting the current situation of First Mountain to me. As it turned out, he was now the only remaining disciple of the entire sect. In order to protect the sect treasure, the vast heaven mirror, he had come to the entrance of the Forbidden Land seeking help. Meanwhile, the ancestor of the Blood River Sword Sect, Shui Yanzi, possessed the strength of the 3rd layer of the dragon painting realm. Their primary objective was to seize the vast heaven mirror. If they failed to obtain it, they would never simply give up. I accepted the vast heaven mirror and placed it inside my robes while silently considering how I could use this opportunity to die in an even more spectacular fashion. At the same time, a massive flying ship appeared in the sky, blotting out the sun as it headed straight toward First Mountain. Standing aboard the vessel, Blood River Sword Sect ancestor Shui Yanzi frowned slightly. He had already seen the message sent by Leng Mingyuan. Although he was surprised to learn that First Mountain still had living ancestors, what angered him even more was the fact that Leng Mingyuan had died there. After all, that man was a vessel he had spent more than 100 years carefully nurturing. Once his own lifespan neared its end, he had planned to seize Leng Mingyuan's body and possess it. Yet now that carefully prepared substitute had perished at First Mountain. The more Shui Yanzi thought about it, the colder his gaze became. He turned toward an elder standing beside him and said, "Your junior brother's death is truly regrettable. After I kill First Mountain's ancestor, you may absorb all of his life essence for yourself." The elder immediately burst into laughter and replied, "Ha ha ha ha, leave it to me. I'll be the first one to charge into battle." Before the flying ship could even land, I silently appeared aboard it. Looking at the members of the Blood River Sword Sect, I said coldly, "Your sect killed so many of my disciples, and yet you still dare come here seeking death. I am Juye True Man. All of you can come at me together." The moment he saw his enemy standing before him, Yin Lanquan's anger exploded. Without hesitation, he unleashed his full power and struck out with a palm. As 2 terrifying waves of spiritual power collided, I remained completely motionless, while Yin Lanquan was blasted backward over 100 steps. Looking at him, I declared, "If I can't kill you within 3 moves, I'll kill myself on the spot." Hearing those words, Yin Lanquan's face turned red with rage. He instantly transformed into a blood-colored sword rainbow and charged directly toward me. I didn't dodge or retreat. Instead, I calmly thrust my sword forward. The instant my blade touched his body, countless deep sword wounds were torn across him. He couldn't believe that someone in the same realm had defeated him so completely in a single exchange. Panic filled his eyes as he shouted, "Save me!" At that moment, Shui Yuanzi immediately activated 3 soul-destroying nails and launched a sneak attack against me from the shadows. I paid no attention to it at all. Gathering my power, I condensed a pure sword phantom, crackling with dark lightning, and slashed downward towards the heavens. In a single strike, Yin Lanquan and the 3 blue soul-destroying nails were split cleanly in half. The aftermath of that sword strike was so powerful that it nearly knocked the distant flying ship out of the sky. Only by activating its sword formation was it able to stabilize itself. Although they had lost the first battle, Shui Yuanzi was secretly delighted. Looking at my cultivation, he finally understood. So he's only at the first layer of the dragon painting realm. Everything before was just intimidation. If I personally make a move, he won't have any chance to fight back. Hearing that in my mind made me excited. Without hesitation, I directly triggered a self-destruction technique and charged straight at him. Shui Yuanzi immediately joined forces with the 5 elders aboard the ship. After sacrificing several precious treasures, they barely managed to suppress the explosion. Even so, 3 elders were severely injured, while the other 2 died on the spot. Looking at the aftermath, Shui Yuanzi couldn't help but curse inwardly. What kind of lunatics are these people from First Mountain? Still, he felt relieved because victory was ultimately his. However, the battle had left him heavily wounded. He estimated it would take at least 50 years of secluded cultivation to recover completely. After calming down slightly, a smile slowly appeared on his face. At last, there was nobody left to stop him. He turned his gaze toward Li Jianshui and asked mockingly, "Li Jianshui, does First Mountain still have any ancestors left?" At that very moment, a voice echoed from the mountain. "Yes, First Mountain's Ling Yuanzi is here." Instantly, the surrounding world transformed into a vast painting filled with cold winds and endless spiritual intent. The moment he witnessed this phenomenon, Shui Yuanzi's expression changed drastically. He never expected another expert capable of creating such terrifying manifestations to appear. Without wasting a second, he ordered his remaining 3 elders to attack me together while he burned his lifespan and activated an escape secret technique. A flash of sword light swept across the world. In a single instant, the 3 elders were killed before they could even react. Meanwhile, Shui Yuanzi had already escaped thousands of miles away, yet a chill still ran through his body. He realized that even after fleeing such an incredible distance, he was still trapped inside the strange phenomenon. This was clearly the power of a 5th-layer dragon painting realm expert. Gritting his teeth, he cursed inwardly, "How can a righteous sect be even more shameless than me? If you had such an expert, why didn't you reveal him sooner?" Then a horrifying thought suddenly appeared in his mind. He remembered the message Ling Mingyuan had sent before his death. Every ancestor who appeared from First Mountain was stronger than the previous one. If Ling Yuanzi was already this powerful, then was there an even stronger existence behind him? The thought nearly scared him to death. Without hesitation, he burned several more decades of lifespan and fled even faster. The only way he could survive now was by seeking help from his master. Watching him disappear into the distance, I made no attempt to chase him. Someone at Shui Yuanzi's level wouldn't give me a very good evaluation score even if I died fighting him. Instead, I should go directly to his headquarters and wipe them out. After giving Li Jianshui a few instructions regarding the sect, I immediately flew toward the horizon. Not long afterward, I arrived at the Blood River Sword Sect's headquarters aboard their own flying ship. Everyone assumed Shui Yuanzi had returned victorious, so they were completely unprepared. I casually waved my hand, and a gigantic sword that seemed capable of separating heaven and earth descended from the sky. In an instant, the Blood River Sword Sect's 1,000-year foundation was reduced to ashes beneath my blade. Afterward, I traveled to the Tianji Pavilion branch located in Tianya City. It didn't take long before I purchased information regarding Shui Yuanzi's whereabouts. After escaping, he had gone to seek help from the powerful force known as the 10,000 Seas Cavern. This organization was enormous and dominated an entire region by itself. Its sect master, Shi Yan, had already reached the first heaven of the immortal platform realm. Under him served the Shi brothers, both experts of the dragon painting realm. More importantly, their holy son was rumored to be the illegitimate son of a supreme being from the Death Forbidden Zone. The moment I learned this information, I became excited. I couldn't wait to pay the 10,000 Seas Cavern a visit. If I could kill their holy son and provoke revenge from that supreme being, then dying at the hands of such an existence would surely earn me an incredibly high evaluation score. Thinking of that possibility, I immediately stepped onto my sword and shot toward the horizon at full speed. Meanwhile, Shui Yuanzi barely managed to escape back to the 10,000 Seas Cavern alive. He was already on the verge of death when he arrived. After hearing the devastating news about everything that had happened, Shi Yan's vision went dark, and he nearly collapsed on the spot. Once he managed to calm himself down, Shui Yuanzi urgently begged the Shi brothers to avenge him. After all, the mission to seize the vast heaven mirror had originally come from the 10,000 Seas Cavern. After listening to Shui Yuanzi's miserable account, the Shi brothers remained expressionless. The ancestor of First Mountain was clearly the type of person who would drag others down with him in a fight to the death. Although they weren't afraid of a fifth-layer dragon painting realm cultivator, they certainly didn't want someone like that constantly targeting their sect. Thinking about it, the Shi brothers were actually preparing to issue an expulsion order and throw Shui Yuanzi out. But before they could do so, a strange phenomenon suddenly appeared in the sky above the main hall. Ling Yuanzi had arrived. Already traumatized by everything that had happened, Shui Yuanzi immediately crawled toward a corner in terror. Seeing this, the Shi brothers had no choice but to step forward and face me themselves. Outside the hall, the entire area had already become a scene of devastation. Blood stained the ground everywhere. Looking at the destruction, the Shi brothers frowned in anger and simultaneously activated the Myriad Souls banner. As two fourth-layer dragon painting realm experts unleashed their power together, a terrifying phenomenon emerged. Soon, my cold moon and pine wind manifestation collided violently with their endless black smoke. The earth shook, mountains trembled, and after the dust settled, I hadn't been pushed back at all. In fact, I held a slight advantage. At the same time, beneath the battlefield, the Holy Son of the 10,000 Seas Cavern, Yin Wuju, watched everything unfold with a crooked smile. His Supreme Being Father had once passed down a secret technique to him, one capable of stealing another person's phenomenon and turning it into his own power. Stuck at the peak of the fourth realm, he had been waiting for the perfect opportunity to break through. And now that I had personally come knocking on their door, it felt as though fate had delivered exactly what he needed. Looking at me, he secretly thought, leave his origin intact. That's my target. One of the elders looked at him in disbelief and said, we might not even win this fight, and you still want him captured alive? Hearing that only made me laugh louder. Then come die with me. My body had already reached its limit, so I immediately activated self-destruction again. In an instant, the countless manifestations filling the sky transformed into an endless sea of flames. Seeing this, everyone desperately unleashed every life-saving technique they possessed. However, Yin Wuju only had fourth realm cultivation and couldn't withstand the impact. His body exploded into countless fragments on the spot. When the gigantic mushroom cloud finally dispersed, Sect Master Shi Yan was awakened from his secluded cultivation. The moment he saw the ruins that had once been the 10,000 Seas Cavern, his heart nearly shattered. Looking around at the destruction, he roared, "The Supreme Being's illegitimate son is dead too. How am I supposed to explain this?" Yet the enemy responsible for all of it had already blown himself up. Even Shui Yuanzi, the one who had caused this disaster in the first place, had fled before the battle even began. Furious beyond reason, Shi Yan dug my remains out from the rubble. He wanted nothing more than to tear my corpse into pieces and vent his rage. But as he looked down, he happened to see the final smile frozen on my face. Confused, he stared at me and muttered, "What exactly are you smiling about?" Meanwhile, I had already walked out of the Forbidden Land once again. This time, my death received an A-rank evaluation from the system, and my cultivation surged all the way to the 8th layer of the Dragon Painting realm. When Li Jianshui saw another ancestor appear, he didn't know whether he should feel happy or sad. If his guess was correct, then Ancestor Ling Yuanzi had already fallen. My explanation soon confirmed his suspicion. Afterward, the two of us paid our respects to the previous versions of myself. Honestly, attending my own funeral multiple times was an incredibly strange feeling. Once that was done, I decided to head toward the 10,000 Seas Cavern again. Rather than waiting for them to recover and attack First Mountain, it would be better to strike while they were wounded and finish the job. As I prepared to leave, Li Jianshui called out, "Ancestor, will you come back?" I didn't turn around. I simply raised my hand and replied, "I'll return." Then I took a single step and vanished into the distance. At the same time, news of the 10,000 Seas Cavern's destruction had already spread throughout Tianya City. The city was now filled with wandering cultivators who had come hoping to profit from the chaos. Battles broke out constantly inside the sect as everyone scrambled for opportunities. The Shi brothers were furious, but there was little they could do. They had been severely injured during the previous battle, and even Sect Master Shi Yan had been forced back into seclusion to heal. In order to solve the crisis, they decided to release the monster sealed within the sect's forbidden grounds. However, before they could break the seal, I had already charged into the 10,000 Seas Cavern once again. Holding the power of wind and thunder in my hands, I unleashed the full might of my 8th layer dragon painting realm cultivation. One terrifying manifestation after another crashed toward the place where Shi Yan was cultivating in seclusion. The moment the surrounding rogue cultivators saw me attack, they immediately joined the battle as well. Everyone was afraid that if they arrived too late, all the opportunities would be taken by someone else. Despite the desperate resistance of the Shi brothers and the remaining elders, the hastily reconstructed sect-protecting formation collapsed almost instantly. Even Shi Yan's cultivation chamber was reduced to rubble by the explosions. Then Shi Yan suddenly opened his eyes. The overwhelming aura of an immortal platform realm realm expert erupted from his body. A vast wave of spiritual power surged outward and collided head-on with my wind and thunder manifestations, protecting the 10,000 Seas cavern from the devastating attack. However, because his healing process had been interrupted midway, Shi Yan's injuries became even more severe than before. Shi Yan's injuries continued worsening, and his cultivation rapidly fell from the immortal platform realm toward the peak of the dragon painting realm. Seeing this, I immediately unleashed another blast of wind and thunder spiritual power. This time, Shi Yan could barely withstand the attack. He staggered backward several steps before dropping to one knee. The moment I sensed his cultivation declining, I was overjoyed. Looking at the cultivators gathered nearby, I shouted, "This devil has been severely wounded by me. If you want the treasures and opportunities inside the 10,000 Seas cavern, now is your chance to take them." The instant those words left my mouth, countless rogue cultivators surged forward while shouting, "Eliminate the devil!" At the same time, two figures suddenly appeared inside the 10,000 Seas cavern. They were elders sent by the Nine Nether Alliance to investigate the situation. Although the Nine Nether Alliance was the superior force behind the 10,000 Seas cavern, these two elders hadn't come to save anyone. Their true goal was to collect any valuable treasures before everything was destroyed. Sweeping the area with their divine senses, they quickly discovered the Shi brothers hiding inside a forbidden zone. The two brothers were chanting incantations while unsealing an ancient restriction. Moments later, a terrifying black mist emerged from the seal, radiating an indescribable sense of dread. In the blink of an eye, nearby cultivators were completely annihilated. Even the Shi brothers themselves became sacrifices to the monster they had released. Meanwhile, high in the sky, I continued my relentless assault. Under my barrage of attacks, Shi Yan was smashed straight into the ground by another blast of wind and thunder. The aura of an immortal platform expert instantly attracted the attention of the Black Mist. When Shi Yan finally turned around and noticed it, it was already too late. His heavily wounded body had no strength left to resist. In the next instant, the strange black mist burrowed directly into him. As the corruption spread through his body, he glared at me and shouted, "Ling Daozi, don't think you've won. Above the 10,000 Seas cavern stands the Nine Nether Alliance. Compared to them, you and I are nothing but ants." The moment his words ended, massive amounts of black mist erupted from underground. Many rogue cultivators who failed to escape in time were instantly struck. Anyone touched by even a tiny amount of the mist died on the spot. In an instant, screams echoed across the battlefield as corpses covered the ground. Then a sinister voice echoed from within the darkness. "Old man, you already look exhausted. Submit to me. I can grant you endless longevity." Looking at this newly emerged enemy, I couldn't help but feel delighted. The power that allowed me to resurrect endlessly seemed fundamentally incompatible with these demonic beings. If I could die while fighting them, the system's evaluation would definitely be extremely high. Thinking that, golden light flashed in my eyes as I laughed and replied, "Endless longevity? I'm not interested." As soon as I finished speaking, I gathered wind and thunder once more and charged alone toward the demon wrapped within the black mist. The rogue cultivators fleeing below couldn't help stopping to watch. One of them shouted emotionally, "Ancestor Ling Daozi of First Mountain, I'll never forget your kindness." Another roared, "Humans and demons can never coexist. What Ling Daozi is doing today makes him a true hero of humanity." A third cultivator declared, "From today onward, I'm a disciple of First Mountain. The enemies of First Mountain are my enemies too." Yet another shouted, "Even if it means offending the Nine Nether Alliance, so what?" As more and more rogue cultivators publicly announced their allegiance to First Mountain, the smile on the demon's face gradually froze. It wasn't powerful human experts that truly frightened him. What he feared were humans willing to fight without fear of death. If one generation rose after another, and could never be completely wiped out, then the demon race would never have peace. Looking at me, a man who had already become a symbol of hope for humanity, the demon finally made up his mind. No matter the cost, he would seize my body. Only by destroying me, the core figure inspiring everyone else, could he force humanity to remember the terror of the demon race. With that thought, he issued a command. Every trace of black mist on the battlefield abandoned its previous targets and rushed toward me. Seeing that the moment had arrived, I stopped holding back. I directly activated self-destruction. A deafening explosion shook the heavens. The shockwave spread across the battlefield, and the rogue cultivators watching below all felt tears filling their eyes. "Ancestor Ling Daozi. He self-destructed," someone whispered. After the battle, many of the cultivators I had saved traveled to First Mountain. Joining as new disciples, they began helping rebuild the sect from the ground up. Meanwhile, I once again stepped out of the Forbidden Land. This death received another A-rank evaluation from the system, and my cultivation finally advanced into the first layer of the immortal platform realm. When Li Jianshui saw yet another ancestor awaken, he immediately put aside his work and rushed over to greet me. He was genuinely afraid that if he arrived even a moment later, he would miss his chance to see me. After all, several previous ancestors had walked out of the Forbidden Land one moment, only for news of their deaths to arrive the next. Looking at me now, guilt filled his eyes once again. If he hadn't begged the ancestors to leave seclusion, perhaps they wouldn't have departed one after another. Sensing the sadness in his heart, I gently rubbed his head and comforted him. There's no need to be sad. Ling Yuanzi and Ling Daozi both died fulfilling their purpose. Right now, protecting ourselves from foreign enemies is what matters most. As I spoke, Shi Yan's final warning suddenly resurfaced in my mind. Based on everything I knew, the Nine Nether Alliance wasn't a single sect at all. It was a colossal organization formed by dozens of sects working together. If a force of that scale came knocking on First Mountain's door, then even my immortality might not be enough. After all, First Mountain was no longer just me and Li Jianshui. More and more disciples had arrived to help rebuild the sect. If I wanted to ensure everyone's safety, I needed to grow stronger as quickly as possible while also preparing enough defensive measures. Realizing this, I wasted no time. I immediately set off for Tianya City to gather information. After investigating for a while, a smile slowly appeared on my face as I locked onto my next target. Found you. After that, I moved with overwhelming force and destroyed two sects that belonged to the Nine Nether Alliance. One was the Spirit Illusion sect, where my old enemy Shui Yuanzi had been hiding, and the other was the Exquisite sect, where the surviving remnants of the 10,000 Seas Cavern had fled. When the other members of the Nine Nether Alliance heard what happened, they were terrified. If not for the strict rules binding the alliance together, many sect masters would have already abandoned it and run for their lives. Once everything was finished, I returned to First Mountain and personally arranged multiple powerful formations around the sect. Meanwhile, millions of miles away aboard a massive flying ship, the Nine Nether Alliance's leader, Li Jiuyu, remained in seclusion while directing everything through a projected phantom. To restore the Alliance's authority, he ordered all of its experts to mobilize and launch a full-scale assault on First Mountain. This battle wasn't simply about destroying First Mountain, he intended to slaughter everything within 10,000 miles, leaving not even chickens or dogs alive. Soon afterward, the mighty army of the Nine Nether Alliance marched toward Tianya City. Before the main force arrived, they sent two vanguard commanders ahead, Blackwater Profound Lord and Ancestor Yu Quan. Both possessed First Heaven Immortal Platform Realm Cultivation. Even though my newest body, Dengfeng Daojun, also possessed a powerful manifestation, fighting two opponents of the same level at once would be extremely difficult. So I chose a simpler solution. The moment I appeared before them, I immediately activated self-destruction. Seeing this, both men cursed loudly and fled into the distance as fast as they could. However, the range of my manifestation continued expanding. The blazing light quickly engulfed every warship in the sky. At the same time, the rogue cultivators on the ground received my signal and activated all the weapons I had previously hidden. Hundreds of thousands of spiritual beams shot upward like missiles toward the Nine Nether Alliance fleet. Attacked from both above and below, countless warships were destroyed, and the retreat paths of Blackwater Profound Lord and Ancestor Yu Quan were completely sealed off. Both men stared with widened eyes in disbelief. Before coming here, they had carefully investigated First Mountain and already knew I liked to self-destruct when cornered. To counter that tactic, they had even brought special treasures designed specifically to suppress explosive techniques. Yet none of them expected me to blow myself up the instant the battle began. On the warships, countless disciples of the Nine Nether Alliance joined forces to resist the destructive phenomenon. But a moment later, screams filled the sky. Both Vanguard ancestors were severely wounded, and of the 3,000 warships that had arrived, fewer than 100 remained. When the explosion finally subsided, Ancestor Yu Quan and Blackwater Profound Lord were so furious they nearly ground their teeth to pieces. They had technically won the exchange, yet the victory was unbelievably humiliating. Dragging their heavily injured bodies, the two descended into First Mountain. Unable to kill me, they decided to vent their anger on everyone else. Looking at the disciples below, one of them sneered, "If we can't kill that old ghost, we'll kill you ants instead." At that moment, Li Jianshui, who had only recently reached the dragon painting realm, stepped forward without hesitation. He knew he couldn't win. He only hoped to buy a few seconds for the forbidden land behind him. If nothing unexpected happened, another ancestor would soon awaken. As that thought crossed his mind, an invisible pressure spread from the forbidden land. I stepped out once again and immediately examined the condition of my new body. This self-destruction had been far too casual, so the system only awarded me a B rank evaluation. My cultivation had increased, but only by a small amount. Even so, Ancestor Yu Quan and Blackwater Profound Lord were horrified. Previously, they had only heard rumors that First Mountain's ancestors could never be completely killed. Today, they were witnessing it with their own eyes. After I introduced myself as Zhuan Dengzi, both of their expressions darkened. According to First Mountain's ancestral ranking, the person standing before them belonged to an even older generation than Dengfeng Daojun. If they fought head-on, their chances of victory were slim. After a brief moment of thought, Ancestor Yu Quan stepped forward, bowed politely, and smiled. A wise man understands the times. If you're willing to join the Nine Nether Alliance, we'll offer you 1,000 years of lifespan. In the future, becoming a great power, breaking through to the Saint Realm, or even reaching the Quasi-Emperor realm may not be impossible. I didn't answer him. Instead, I immediately unleashed a forbidden ultimate technique. Buddha's light illuminates all. The two of them didn't even have time to take out their life-saving treasures. Already heavily injured, they were instantly engulfed by the terrifying holy light and burned into charcoal. After confirming there were no more enemies nearby, I sat down and quietly began refining energy. Ever since leaving seclusion and beginning my revenge on behalf of First Mountain, I had probably killed tens of thousands of enemies. Letting all those souls simply disappear felt like a waste. Conveniently, this new body, Xuandengzi, specialized in refining artifacts and spiritual energy. So I decided to forge a treasure for First Mountain. Under everyone's watchful eyes, a black banner wrapped in sinister smoke slowly took shape in my hands. Finally, I sealed the souls of Blackwater, Profound Lord and Ancestor Yuquan into it. As horrifying screams echoed from within the banner, I smiled and said, "From now on, you'll be called the Human Emperor Banner." Meanwhile, aboard the Nine Nether Alliance's main ship, Alliance leader Li Juyu suddenly sensed the deaths of his two Vanguard commanders. His expression immediately changed. How can a mere immortal platform cultivator be this troublesome? Without hesitation, he dispatched reinforcements. This time, he sent Madame Xuanji and Madame Tianju, along with 10 elders who had recently entered the immortal platform realm. After finishing my refinement and taking a short rest, I carried the Human Emperor banner and ascended into the sky. By then, Madame Xuanji and Madame Tianju had already arrived outside First Mountain. Sensing my cultivation, they exchanged puzzled glances. I was only at the first heaven of the immortal platform realm's initial stage. Yet Blackwater, Profound Lord, and Ancestor Yuquan had both been at the middle stage of the same realm. How could they have died to someone weaker than them? Unable to understand the situation, Madame Xuanji stopped thinking about it and immediately launched the first attack, charging straight toward me. Seeing Madame Xuanji attack, I remained completely calm. With a wave of my hand, I activated the Human Emperor banner. Thick black smoke billowed outward, and within it, two figures slowly took shape. The moment Madame Xuanji recognized their faces, panic instantly appeared in her eyes. She couldn't believe I had actually refined experts from the Nine Nether Alliance into puppets under my control. By the time she realized the danger, it was already too late. Following my command, the fully refined Blackwater, Profound Lord, and Ancestor Yuquan charged toward her with murderous intent. Knowing she had absolutely no chance of winning, Madame Xuanji immediately called out, asking Madame Tianju to help her escape. But the moment she turned around, she discovered that Madame Tianju had already run away. I seized the opening without hesitation and killed Madame Xuanji with a single strike before immediately absorbing her soul into the Human Emperor banner. The remaining 10 immortal platform elders were terrified and scattered in every direction. Unfortunately for them, their speed was nowhere near enough to outrun Blackwater and Yuquan. One after another, they were captured and sealed inside the banner as well. Looking at the growing army of powerful souls under my command, I suddenly felt far more confident about defeating the Nine Nether Alliance. However, right at that moment, a wave of dizziness struck me. Controlling the Human Emperor banner consumed an enormous amount of lifespan. At this rate, this body probably wouldn't even survive long enough to self-destruct before dying of old age. Realizing that, I slowly descended back to the ground and began explaining things to Li Jianshui. This treasure, the Human Emperor banner, will one day become First Mountain's ultimate divine weapon. It already possesses spiritual awareness. After I die, it will automatically return to First Mountain on its own. So no matter what happens, don't be afraid of it. Li Jianshui nodded seriously. But when he raised his head again to look at me, I had already passed away. Looking at the black banner planted firmly in the ground, many disciples wore confused expressions. Seeing that, Li Jianshui immediately explained with a serious face, Ancestor Xuandengzi already said this is the Human Emperor banner. In ancient times, the Human Emperor revered black above all colors. Since this banner is black, there's naturally nothing strange about it. The disciples immediately nodded in understanding. So that's how it is, as expected of the ancestor. Even the color of his treasure has such deep meaning. A black Human Emperor banner really is imposing. Soon afterward, I stepped out of the Forbidden Land once more. This time, my cultivation had already reached the second heaven of the immortal platform realm. Combined with the Human Emperor banner, I no longer had any reason to fear the Nine Nether Alliance. It was time to switch from defense to offense. Without wasting a second, I teleported directly onto the Nine Nether Alliance's main warship. Then I released the countless souls inside the Human Emperor banner and sent them charging toward Li Juyu. Seeing this, Li Juyu immediately ordered every expert under his command to resist while he personally rushed toward me. My cultivation was slightly higher than his, and I quickly gained the upper hand. Forming hand seals with one hand, I summoned Heavenly Punishment itself. A bolt of divine judgment crashed down and instantly killed Li Juyu. But just as his body fell, several mysterious formation patterns suddenly lit up across him. The next moment, the soul of a quasi-emperor emerged before everyone. At the same time, my Heavenly Punishment attack completely vanished as if it had never existed. The soul attached itself to Li Juyu's body and then casually reached out toward me. In an instant, I was frozen in midair and completely unable to move. Looking at me, the quasi-emperor calmly asked, "Little one, tell me where First Mountain's supreme weapon, the Vast Heaven Mirror, is located." I laughed and replied, "If I had the Vast Heaven Mirror with me, I would have already smashed you to death with it, old fool." The quasi-emperor's eyes narrowed. "It's been many years since anyone dared speak to me like that. You're the first." I grinned even wider and answered, "Don't worry, there'll be plenty more after me." A carefree smile spread across my face as I activated self-destruction once again. However, inside the domain of a quasi-emperor, my explosion didn't create even the slightest ripple. Looking at me, the quasi-emperor said coldly, "Since this ant refuses to speak, I'll simply search his soul myself." A terrifying divine sense immediately swept toward First Mountain. Yet the moment it reached the Forbidden Land, the quasi-emperor suddenly froze. What's going on? How did another person suddenly appear inside that Forbidden Land? At that exact moment, I stepped out from the Forbidden Land once again. Dying at the hands of a quasi-emperor had earned me an S-rank evaluation from the system. My cultivation had skyrocketed all the way to the 6th level of the Great Power Realm. Although I was still insignificant compared to a quasi-emperor, I wasn't worried at all. As long as I kept dying, sooner or later I would surpass even a quasi-emperor. With a loud roar, I charged into the sky while waving the human emperor banner and attacked the quasi-emperor's phantom.